Would you please pray with me? Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I took my kids to vacation Bible school this week at Van Kirk Lutheran Church up near Monaco. Allow me a quick commercial for Pastor Patrice and the folks at Van Kirk. It was an awesome week. If my kids were here, they'd probably be with Miss Michelle right now, telling her all about the amazing week they had. They had like 40 kids there, a terrific team of adults and teachers. But perhaps maybe the most impressive thing was the decorations. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Van Kirk's little church that they have there, but the whole inside of the church was covered, like almost every square foot, in decorations for their jungle safari theme. The walls were covered in cardboard rolls painted to look like bamboo shoots. I mean, it was incredible. They even had a full-size Jeep made out of wood in the front of the church for everybody to sit in and get their picture taken. It was great stuff. Next year, you all got to go. But it was a special joy for me this week to take my kids to church and be dad rather than pastor. Perhaps you've never thought about that reality for me. And so much of the week this week, I went with Jacob and Cecilia's class, and I just listened to their stories. I got to help with crafts. And of course, I ate all the snack food that Cece would have no business eating, because she only eats like 3 things. The first day was really fun, although I'll admit I was a little bit nervous, apprehensive as we were on our way there. From time to time, both Jacob and Cecilia have been a little bit anxious about going someplace new and being with people they don't know and being comfortable. You would never know that here, but like other places, that's their deal. And this was certainly a new place. They'd never been to Van Kirk, and really they didn't know anybody there that they were planning on being with. But fortunately, when we got there Monday, Pastor Patrice was there with her arms open to give hugs, and they actually knew one of the other little girls there from our Saturday morning F3s here at House of Prayer. And so we walked into the church, and they immediately ran to be with their class, and like a bye dad on the way, like, bye dad, see you, and they're heading down there. And I was surprised and just excited for them because they were excited. But Jonah, on the other hand, was not quite so excited to be there. He was anything but comfortable running off by himself to be with the other kids. For a while, I didn't know if maybe I had this new growth on my leg about the size of a 1.5-year-old toddler. For most of the day, poor little Jonah interestedly watched the other kids while he clung to my leg or sat on my lap. When I dared to do something like go to the bathroom or get a drink, he'd leave his sight lines. He would just fall apart into a little mess of 1.5-year-old, crying big pathetic toddler tears. It was sad, the poor little guy. The whole time I just kept thinking, I'm like this oasis of comfortability for him in the midst of everything bad. Everything was big and scary. All the people were terrible, except when I was there and he was holding on to me, and then he could be okay looking at everything else. I was the safety in his wilderness of the world there. And so I tried to think about Vacation Bible School through Jonah's eyes. And I can relate to him, right? I've been in new places and felt really small. I like familiarity and comfortability. Like, I get anxious when I think about going on a bike ride to some place I haven't ridden before. I'm like, will the roads be good there? Will they be kind of dangerous? Will someone hit me? Will the hills be too hard to climb? Meeting new people is really tough for me. I don't like meeting new people. Meeting all you for the first time, that was tough. I'd much rather be in safe places. I'm like Jonah. I've been in scary places like Jonah. I've been in bad places that made me feel scared or sad. I've been in those places recently. Have you? I'll bet you have. In the gospel reading that we just heard a few minutes ago, there's a lot there, and I'm going to focus really on the story of Jesus feeding the real big crowd. Probably many of you know that story well. It says at the very end, 5,000 men and women and children, because we know women and children aren't really worth delineating and numbering, right? Just teasing. Just teasing. If you think about it, though, if there's 5,000 men, there's probably 5,000 women too, right? And their children. If you put like 3 children for every couple, which would have been a really conservative number, 25,000 people there, that's a pretty big number. Who knows for real, but Suffice to say, it was a really big crowd. And again, you've probably heard this story before, maybe lots of times, the miracle of feeding all those people with just a couple fish and a few loaves of bread. I mean, it's a miracle. It's supposed to be a miracle. Matthew even inserts that miracle language into the story. As Jesus takes the bread, he holds it up over his head, it says, and in verse 19 it says, Jesus blessed it, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. That's miracle language. For those with keen ears, you recognize those words. They're words we use every week here in worship. They're the words that we will use in just a few minutes as part of our communion liturgy. This is a miracle moment. It's a great story and it's a great miracle, though perhaps you, like me, have heard this story so many times that you miss a couple of the little nuances that Matthew throws in here. Check out how the story begins in verse 13. You can look in your bulletin, it's okay. Jesus hears the bad news about John the Baptist being killed, and he goes off, it says, to a deserted place, a wilderness. It gets translated both those kinds of ways. The Greek actually means a wilderness or a desert, like the sandy, dry, arid desert. I mean, it's a place of badness, no life, nothing growing, a place where you don't want to be, and that's where Jesus goes. And the story continues with the crowds then following Jesus out to the desert. They follow after Jesus, and Jesus, it says, has compassion on them. He heals them. And then the disciples show up, and apparently they're anxious because they think everybody needs to be fed by them. And so they tell Jesus to command all the people back to the villages where there's food. Again, they're in the desert. There is no food in the desert. But Jesus tells them, no, you feed them. But all they have is a couple fish, some bread. And so Jesus says, just very simply, bring it to me. And don't miss the next verse. In the middle of the wilderness, the desert, the bad place, the lifeless, nothing growing badlands, when Jesus is the one in charge, verse 19 says that Jesus commands the people to sit. Do you see it? In the grass. Right? The Greek word there can mean the grass, the sproutlings, the new life that's happening, the new growth. Do you see the beauty here? Do you see the juxtaposition? They're in the desert, the badlands, the death, the sand, the nothing growing, and Jesus has them sit in the lush grass. I know what you might say, because they said this to me in Bible study on Wednesday. Even in the wilderness, there's grass that grows, right? Yeah, so I'll give you that. There might be a little bit of grass growing in the badland, the desert here. But how many people are there? I would say to you, is there really enough grass for 25,000 people to sit? Or however big the crowd is. I mean, something miraculous is on its way here, right? There is a miracle going on. When we give the problem to Jesus, miracles happen. Maybe for some of us, just giving up the problem in the first place is the miracle. When we let go of what worries us, what upsets us, what we fear, what hurts us, what causes us anxiety, when we give it to Jesus, that is the miracle. Jesus takes our deserts and makes lush green grass for us to rest. I heard a sermon a couple years ago, actually here for the evening worship service because he was doing a trial sermon. Pastor Tony Schneck, who suggested that the miracle in this story wasn't that Jesus did something crazy and magical and miraculous with the multiplication of bread and fish. Rather, in that day, in the first century, if people were going on a day trip with their family, they would have brought their own food to eat on a trip like that. And so Pastor Schneck argued that the real miracle was in this place of Oasis, in the lush green grass, under Jesus' care, that people shared what they had. They all pitched in and held everything that they had, all their food. They held it in common. My food is our food. And when everybody shared their food, verse 20 says, all ate and were filled. And there were 12 baskets extra. a miracle in the desert, a miracle at the oasis that is Jesus. So a beautiful thing happened at Vacation Bible School for my little toddler Jonah. After cowering and hiding behind me for 2 hours of the 2.5 hours of Bible school, he realized that he didn't need to be scared anymore. And I don't know what it was. I don't know how he came to this conclusion. He ate his snack of ice cream and still moped around after that. I don't know what the moment was. I don't know why he made up his mind to not be afraid, but he did. He walked away from me. He played with another one of the little kids, a girl. He realized that the oasis of love and care was a little bigger than he thought it was, a little bigger than just me. By the time the day was over, he was trying to sing as much as a 1.5-year-old can sing, and he was definitely laying down some good dance moves. He can dance. He did not get that from his father. Beautifully, he found a way to let go of his fear and give real trust to that room full of strangers. When you feel like you are in the desert, friends, may you realize that Jesus is with you, offering you lush grass. May you realize, like Jonah did, that when you let go of fear, anxiety, hurt, that you will feel better. And may you realize that the people who walk this world with you, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow with you, are part of an oasis of God's love. God is here. Amen.